Wars, destruction, and chaos in human history have never ended. These conflicts, which have existed in every period of history, have sometimes turned into crimes against humanity. War is a struggle between soldiers and armies. Gentle soldiers know not to wage war against innocent civilians and people. Heroic soldiers who put their lives on the line to protect their own people likewise sacrifice themselves so that their people are not harmed. Unfortunately, hostilities between peoples, crises, and war lead to unwanted events. This is where war crimes come into play. Although war may seem like a last resort, there are certain rules set by international authorities. The most important of these is not to harm civilians. Now, if you are ready, let us examine one of the most tragic events that humanity has seen in recent history, the Srebrenica Genocide. If you like and watch military content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave comments. Here we go. The calendars were showing July 11th, 1995. The world witnessed one of the most horrific events in human history. 8,372 Muslim Bosniaks were massacred in Srebrenica, the biggest human tragedy in Europe since the Second World War. At least 8,372 Bosniak civilians were brutally massacred in Srebrenica. Although years have passed, the tragedy is still fresh in the memory. Yugoslavia disintegrated after the civil wars between 1986 and 1992. Then in 1992, Bosnia-Herzegovina declared its independence in a referendum led by Alija Izetbegović. The decision of independence was accepted by the US, Western countries, and the UN. However, Serbs took action to alienate Bosniaks and Croats in the region. In a short time, many Bosniak cities were occupied. In July 1995, during the Yugoslav Civil War, the Serbian army invaded Srebrenica as part of Operation Crveja 95. This event was not only an occupation but also a massacre, because at least 8.372 people were killed by the heavily armed Serbian army under the command of Ratko Mladic in Srebrenica, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Thousands of people, young and old, lost their lives in the massacre. In addition to the Serbian army, special units of the Bosnian Serbian army known as Scorpions also participated in the massacre. Neither the United Nations declaration of Srebrenica as a safe zone nor the 600 Dutch peacekeepers in the city could prevent the massacre. The Srebrenica incident has been engraved in world history as the largest massacre of human beings and ethnic genocide committed in Europe after World War II. After the fall of Yugoslavia in 1992, the Serbs started massacring the Yugoslav people. The United Nations, which wanted to intervene in the incident, declared 6 regions safe, and one of these regions was Srebrenica. This city, which had a population of 24,000 before the war, reached a population of 60,000 with refugees and people who took refuge in the city from outside. With the increase in the population, this city turned into a concentration camp, trying to fight against diseases and hunger. The weapons that the inhabitants had acquired to protect themselves were also confiscated by the UN forces on security grounds. When Serbian soldiers under the command of Ratko Mladic, on the orders of Serbian President Radovan Karadzic, began to harass the town more frequently, people in the camp asked for their weapons to be returned. But the Dutch commander of the camp, Tom Karamans, refused. UN forces responded only by flying 2 F-16s over the town. The Dutch soldiers evacuated the city in the middle of the night on orders from the Dutch general, the commander of the UN peacekeeping force in Bosnia, and handed over the camp to the Serbs with 25,000 refugees inside. The city, which was sold to the Serbs by the Dutch commander, succumbed to the Serbs in a week-long massacre. The group captured 1,000 people in the countryside of Srebrenica and started to kill the prisoners on the orders of Ratko Mladic. The bodies were then dismembered by the soldiers to prevent identification, burned in the crematorium, and buried in mass graves. European states remained silent, as if they were secretly supporting this massacre, which lasted for about 5 days. After the occupation of Srebrenica, some of the Muslims living in the city took refuge with the Dutch soldiers stationed in the old accumulator factory located directly opposite today's martyrdom, while others chose to reach the area controlled by Bosniak soldiers through the forest road. The fate of those who chose the forest road and those who took refuge with the Dutch soldiers was the same. Thousands of Bosniaks who chose the Forest Road, also known as the Death Road among the people due to the massive massacres, were killed in ambushes set up by Serbian soldiers. Srebrenica, which experienced the biggest massacre of humanity after World War II, bowed down to Serbian murderers. The Serbian commander Ratko Mladic, who was captured in the village of Sirmian in Serbia 13 years after the massacre, was sentenced to life imprisonment by the International Criminal Court in The Hague. However, it was reported that Ratko Mladic, who has been wanted for execution for 16 years, will be transferred to The Hague after some arrangements to be made within Serbian law. The traces of this atrocity, to which the whole world remained indifferent, still remain, and new mass graves continue to be found. In late July 1995, most of the Dutch soldiers who surrendered the city to Serbian soldiers had to undergo psychological treatment upon their return home. While the Dutch government does not accept any responsibility, most of the 600 lightly armed Dutch soldiers who turned a blind eye to the massacre of the Serbs by leaving the city have expressed their regret at every opportunity. One of the soldiers who wrote a book about the moments they lived in Srebrenica expressed his regret for the incident with the following words: "I wanted to die. I cannot forgive myself for not protecting the people who took refuge with us, even though we promised to protect innocent people." These words are the biggest document of the ethnic massacre in the city. Hasan Nuhanovic, who worked as an interpreter in the UN camp established in Srebrenica, shared the following in his memoirs. The Serbian commander came to the camp where the Dutch soldiers were located and demanded that the people who had taken refuge in the camp be handed over, otherwise the camp would be bombed. Serbian soldiers disfigured the bodies and buried them in dozens of mass graves. 600 of the genocide victims were found 8 years later and buried in the Potocari Memorial Cemetery. After the genocide in Srebrenica, 12,469 bone remains were exhumed from mass graves. So far, 7,757 identities related to Srebrenica have been confirmed. Identified 6,721 genocide victims were buried in Potocari Memorial Cemetery. In its 2007 judgment, the International Court of Justice in The Hague described the events in and around Srebrenica as genocide, in line with evidence from the International Criminal Tribunal for the Former Yugoslavia, ICTY. Serbian commander Ratko Mladic was sentenced to life imprisonment for several crimes, including the Srebrenica Genocide, in the trial at the ICTY. In 2016, the same court sentenced Radovan Karadzic, the former wartime leader of the Bosnian Serbs, to 40 years in prison for 10 separate crimes, including the Srebrenica Genocide. So far, 45 Serbs have been sentenced to a total of 699 years in prison in the Srebrenica trials held in different courts. On the other hand, former Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic was also accused of the genocide in Srebrenica, but died in prison while his trial was ongoing. A ceasefire was declared after the Srebrenica Genocide, the pain of which is still fresh in the memories, but the lives lost did not come back. Srebrenica became a black stain on human history. In the history of war, such events are seen as a shame against the nature of military service. What do you think? What do you think about the targeting of civilians in wars? We care about your views. Please share them with us.